Raider Nation, hit that subscribe button for content around the NFL draft, free agency. If it involves the silver and black, we're going to talk about it here on the Raiders Report, so turn on those notifications because lots of content coming up before the NFL draft. Coming up here on the Raiders Report, after you watch this video, I am a big believer that there's going to be a little bit of hope that the Las Vegas Raiders have a legitimate chance to draft Ohio State quarterback C.J. Stroud. I'm Mitchell Renz. You're watching the Raiders Report from Chat Sports, and here is a picture. And if you want this picture to come to life, I want you to hit that like button right now. I know for a fact Dave Ziegler is a big fan of this young man right here. It's something that we have talked about multiple times. But the reason why you're going to have a little bit more hope is not so much of the latest news or rumors around the Raiders. That's not it. It's the latest news and rumors around the Carolina Panthers, around the Houston Texans, and around the Arizona Cardinals. After you get done watching this video, you're going to sit back and be like, shit, there is actually a chance that the Raiders end up drafting this guy right here. So here are the picks, if you do not know, leading up to the Raiders at number 7. Carolina, Houston, and Arizona, that's 1, 2, 3. The Indianapolis Colts, Seattle Seahawks, Detroit Lions at 4, 5, and 6. So the latest rumors circulating right now around the Carolina Panthers obviously involves the quarterback. When you go from 9 and you work your way all the way up to number 1, making a deal with the Chicago Bears, it tells the entire world that you are trading for a quarterback. Obviously, unless the movie's draft day. Many people believe it is either Bryce Young, the quarterback out of Alabama, or Ohio State quarterback C.J. Stroud. However, there is a new report over the last 24 hours that is popping up from the top beat reporter from Carolina, and unlike the Raiders beat reporters, mostly other NFL teams' reporters actually have inside sources. And he is saying, do not sleep on Anthony Richardson. And the reason why he is saying, don't sleep on Richardson, it comes more from the Carolina Panthers owner. And when you look at the articles that he's releasing, it sounds like David Tepper, the owner of the Carolina Panthers, likes Anthony Richardson. He likes Bryce Young. However, Frank Reich, the Panthers head coach, and the staff, they have their eyes on C.J. Stroud. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Panthers decide to do. But if the owner of the team steps up and says, hey, man, you're taking this guy. I hired you to do a job. I got you the number 1 overall pick. We made a lot of things work. You're going to take the guy I want. I mean, unfortunately, Frank Reich's probably going to be like, shit, yeah, I'm going to have to end up taking somebody. Also, the other reason why Tepper apparently really likes Richardson is he's been comped to Cam Newton. Cam Newton is the greatest quarterback all time to ever come out of Carolina. If you have the opportunity to get a NFL MVP, the last QB that made you a Super Bowl caliber team, that might be a difficult thing to pass up. On top of that, Tepper apparently is a big fan of the S2. If you don't know what the S2 is, I will explain it here in a little bit. But there are 2 quarterbacks in this year's class that did very well on the S2. Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson. So my question after hearing all of those reports from the top beat reporter in Carolina, what is the % chance that the Carolina Panthers take Anthony Richardson? Is it a 0% chance? Is it a 10%? 50, 100, whatever number it is, I want you to give your best estimated guess down below. So now I know a lot of y'all, I can see it right now in the live show, shout out to the 440 people watching, are asking, all right, well, what exactly is the S2 eval? It is a scientifically validated measure to evaluate cognitive capacity as it relates to high-speed decision-making. Mitch, it's a lot of big words. Dumb it down for me. I'm glad because that's what I had to do. Essentially, this test analyzes a quarterback's ability to make good, quick decisions. That's, in a nutshell, what it is. And when you go back and you look at some of the quarterbacks that have had a lot of success with this S2 evaluation, It's actually starting to become pretty interesting, and there are NFL GMs, NFL head coaches, owners that really look closely to this test. A good, I example to show you. Last year, Brock Purdy scored an insanely high score on the S2. And the co-founder of this test had this to say on Brock Purdy before he was even drafted. The game will never be too fast for Brock, I'll say that. I don't think he'll ever have trouble adjusting. You can say what you want about Brock Purdy from a talent standpoint. Nobody's ever going to say, that guy's got all the tools. No. But Brock Purdy, you have to be able to respect the fact that when he was in the huddle, when it mattered the most, he stepped up and he played well. He made good decisions. And if the S2 is a way that some of these teams can evaluate a quarterback's decision-making, I do think when you see some of the other names in terms of players that scored really well on this test, I think there's going to be some people that do take this into consideration. So according to Joe Person, who is the Carolina beat reporter, Richardson is in consideration for the number 1 overall pick. But he said Bryce Young is the favorite, not C.J. Stroud. He said Bryce Young is the favorite for the Carolina Panthers at number 1 overall. And remember how I said Anthony Richardson scored well on the S2. Bryce Young scored the highest S2 score out of any quarterback in the 2023 NFL draft class. In fact, the new reports coming out on how well he did was apparently he scored a 98, which was higher than Joe Burrow, higher than Josh Allen, higher than Patrick Mahomes, higher than Justin Fields. And once David Tepper saw that, he then put him at number 1 on the board. All I'm saying is this, even if the coaches want to go with C.J. Stroud, if the owner steps in and says, no, you're either taking Bryce Young or Anthony Richardson, that makes this an NFL draft a little bit more intriguing, at least in my book. Coming up next here on the Raiders Report, must-see NFL draft news and rumors. But guess what? I got a brand new sponsor, and I'm really excited to be able to talk to you about them because, today's Friday, happy hour after all. And I already took my Z-Biotics, took it a little bit before I started drinking because I knew I wanted to drink responsibly after all. Use promo code ChatSports for 15% off. Let me tell you about this awesome sponsor that I know the nation's going to love. Let's face it. After y'all hit me with a bunch of super chats, I don't quite bounce back the best the next day. That is until I found Z-Biotics. Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. It's this, when you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Z-Biotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut, where you need it the most. Drink Z-Biotics before drinking alcohol. Drink responsibly and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Give Z-Biotics a try for yourself. Go to zbiotics.com/chatsports to get 15% off your first order when you use code ChatSports at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money-back guaranteed, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund you your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/chatsports and use the code ChatSports at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring the Raiders Report. The other thing that I love about this product, obviously, we're a big believer here. We're going to have a good time. We're going to do our thing. But I've told you, all right, once I turn 30, I want to be a little bit more responsible. I want to take care of my body. I'm in this for the long haul after all. But I will say this. If you plan on taking a trip to Vegas this year, right, if you got a bachelor party, a bachelorette, that's how big the bottle is. And you can get an entire case of 6 for an entire week, okay? That fits great in your luggage. You could take it to Vegas. You can have a good time. And, hey, if you're going to be there for a Raiders tailgate, if you're going to have a good time, I want y'all to be prepared. So go to zbiotics.com/chatsports. Very portable. What'd you say? And responsible. The biggest thing that we have on here is responsibility. We might even call it the responsibility report. Shout out to Z-Biotics. All right, let's keep on talking about here the Las Vegas Raiders potentially trading up because I hear the story around Carolina and I hear them potentially taking quarterback, whether that be Anthony Richardson, whether that be Bryce Young. But we know that the reports have been out there that the Raiders like Stroud, they like Young. If Richardson goes number 1, then Las Vegas is absolutely positively a team to look at to potentially trade up. They tried to trade up to number 1 with the Chicago Bears. Did the trade go through? No, obviously not. They weren't willing to give up as much. But if you're an organization and you're willing to trade up to number 1, if one of these two guys is available at 2, if both of them are available at 2, I would say like McDaniels and Ziegler are going to be on the phone, and they're going to be looking at either calling Houston or calling Arizona and saying, hey, we're going to be trading up. But what if there was a scenario where the Carolina Panthers, they take Anthony Richardson, and then the Houston Texans, they don't even take a quarterback? If you think that's crazy, then you really need to start listening up to some of those beat reporters down in Houston, and you should have probably listened to Chugs because he's from Houston, and he's been telling you all this for months. The Texans are not a lock to take a quarterback at number 2. It's not it. There's new reports that have come out this week that Houston doesn't know if they want to take a QB, because this is a team that believes that they need to be able to build the overall roster before going out and selecting a QB that high. And here's another very interesting rumor. Nick Caserio, good buddies with Josh McDaniels, good buddies with Dave Ziegler. There's a report that right now Caserio could potentially leave the Texans and go back to the New England Patriots. If that were to happen, the Texans could hire Adam Peters, who is the assistant general manager of the San Francisco 49ers, friends with DeMeco Ryans, who is a defensive-minded guy. On top of all of this, you go back and you look at all of the Houston Texans' latest picks, I would say, that have been in the top 5. It's been a lot of defensive players. In fact, it's been all defensive players. So you have, Houston not sold on taking a quarterback. ESPN in the last 24 hours put out a report that apparently Houston loves Will Anderson Jr. You know DeMeco Ryans is that defensive-minded head coach. I said here on the Raiders Report, I said on Chat Sports, it's an interesting hire to me to bring in a defensive-minded guy and then expect him to be able to draft your franchise quarterback at 2. In fact, I said the fact that they hired Ryans almost indicates to me that they're not a lock to take a QB. And now you're seeing more and more reports come up. So all I'm sitting here is this. If Carolina takes Anthony Richardson because it's what Dave Tepper wants, cool. Even if they go with CJ, or if they go with Bryce Young, who their top beat reporter is saying is the favorite to go over number 1 overall because Tepper likes the S2 test, okay, Houston then ends up potentially not taking a quarterback. Well, then shit, that means CJ Stroud could potentially be on the board for the Raiders at number 3, which means that a quarterback that the Raiders like could be available at 2 or 3. I'm not saying that it's a done deal. I'm not saying if we're sitting here on draft night and Stroud's there at 3, both quarterbacks are on the board at number 2, that it's going to happen. No. I am going to guarantee you, though, that a phone call would be made. Why? Because if you call about the number 1 overall pick, then you are going to call about the number 2, or you're going to call about the number 3 pick in general. Now, value is value. And this Raiders regime has been all about finding the right value. They will not overpay. We've seen it in free agency, and I think you even saw it with the trade that they went for with Chicago. So apparently, the Chicago Bears, this was reported by The Athletic, this is what the Chicago Bears asked for the number 1 overall pick. They asked for your first 3 picks. They asked for 2 firsts. Technically, it's 3 firsts, 2 seconds is the way that I would wrap my mind around it. The Raiders said no to that. Okay, so that's at least a little bit of a benchmark of what they were asked. Raiders said no. I mean, what if it doesn't cost nearly as much to go to 2 or 3 as what the Raiders potentially thought? Because who knows, Arizona might not want that pick. All I know is this, on top of that, if the Raiders trade up for a quarterback in round 1, it is locked and loaded. Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler will be back in 2024. So everybody out there, you got your job. You know, we all do different things in our life. But do you think that Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler are the type of coaches, are the type of men to say, hey, and I wouldn't blame them for doing this. Job security and anything that you do in life, it's important. And you do job security for your family. So if you knew by trading up for a quarterback that you locked and loaded in your job, because there's no way that if you drafted a QB that high and you didn't give him more than 1 year to see how it worked, there's no way you're getting fired. You're locked and loaded for 2 extra years. It's something interesting. right? We got to consider that. You have to consider the real life possibility of them thinking like normal human beings, like, shit, if I trade up for a QB, I have my job secured, not only for 2023, but 2024. It's a big time deal. My question to you, though, is while I'm ranting here on the Raiders Report presented by Z-Biotics, if Bryce Young or CJ Stroud is there on the board at number 3, do you trade up? It's a tough question. Give me a yes, or I want you to give me a no. A lot of people might be surprised by my answer. I think CJ Stroud is a hell of a quarterback. I think Bryce Young is a hell of a quarterback. But when I sit down and I go over all of the notes that I have curated over the month, over the past year, I still do not think that it is best for this Raiders team, long haul, to trade up for a quarterback this year. The reason why I say that is because you can trade up for a Bryce Young. You can trade up for a CJ Stroud. That's great and all. But the Raiders have already spent money on Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, this might surprise you, as much as I don't even know Jimmy G. I actually don't know how much better the Raiders are with CJ Stroud or Bryce Young compared to Jimmy G in the first year. And I only mean that in the first year. Could one of those quarterbacks be a franchise guy? Yeah, they absolutely could. But my idea for the best Raiders team overall would be building the shit out of this defense in 2023. You have all these draft picks. You have an unbelievably deep draft class on the defensive side of the football. You got 12 freaking picks to fix this defense and build for the long haul. And if you really want to trade up, I would rather you build the defense in 2023, stockpile a bunch of picks in 2024, and then go get you Drake May or Caleb Williams. Because Caleb Williams, Drake May, I feel like I've said it 100 times on the show, are better than CJ Stroud. They're better than Bryce Young. They're better than Anthony Richardson. They will have better NFL careers than both of those players, in my personal opinion. Now, obviously, fit depends on everybody. But from a talent evaluation standpoint alone, if I told you that you could either get Caleb Williams, Drake May, Bryce Young, or CJ Stroud, who would you take? I would really question your decision-making ability if you did not take Caleb Williams or Drake May. Let's build the defense, and then let's go get ourselves a franchise quarterback in 2024. That's what I think is the best thing for the Silver and Black. It's patience. It's a long game. I know we want to win right now, but I also think this. Even if you draft one of those QBs, are we confident that McDaniels is going to be smart enough to play them over Jimmy Garoppolo? I still think Jimmy Garoppolo is probably going to play no matter what. All right, y'all, before we wrap up today's Rumors Show, if you all want to hang out with Jeremy Chuggs and I Saturday, April 15th, tomorrow, at 7 p.m. Central Time, here's the address. Put it in there. We will see y'all there. Can't wait to be able to hang out with the nation. Now, there is a little bit more here around the Raiders potentially trading up. We talked about Carolina. We talked about the Houston Texans. Well, let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals, because this has been a team that I would almost be willing to bet right now they are locked and loaded no matter what. They're going to be trading the number 3 overall pick, because where there is smoke, there is fire, and there has been a lot of smoke around Arizona. There was an early report probably 2-3 months ago. Cardinals are open to trading back. Then it was DeAndre Hopkins open for a trade. In the last 2 weeks, there's reports now coming out that, hell, they could potentially cut him for salary cap. You read that report, it should scream rebuild. Rebuild. Kyler Murray likely out for the first half of the 2023 season. So, you have those reports. If I was the Raiders and one of those big quarterbacks is on the board, I actually don't necessarily know if it would cost as much this year as what a lot of people think, because if I'm the Raiders and I look at what Arizona's doing, I say, okay, the only way that I might be okay with you trading up for a QB is if you got a deal somewhat like this, okay? I still would rather go up and get one of those other 2 quarterbacks, but if this was the deal presented to you, what do you think? You give up your first-round pick this year, and then you're giving up a first and a second-round pick in next year's draft. So you're able to go up and get yourself a CJ Stroud, a Bryce Young, and then you still have 11 other picks to be able to build that defense or build around you. Do you like this idea? Because to me, I think that this is a deal that the Cardinals could potentially take, because they're going to rebuild this year. Everything that they've done already this offseason screams rebuild, prepare for 2024. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask you about this. What do you think? Is this a good deal for the Raiders? Good, bad? Let me know. The only way that it's good in my book is if you find your franchise quarterback, that you are 100% confident that C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young is going to help you compete with the Justin Herberts, with the Patrick Mahomeses, with all these other elite quarterbacks in the AFC. That is the only way this is a good idea. If you have even a little bit of doubt, sorry, you don't do the deal.